Tony Nader. I'm a medical doctor and scientist, specialist in brain and cognitive science. I have been with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and studied the science of consciousness. I lead the Transcendental Meditation program worldwide. We would like to share with you thoughts about the deep meanings of consciousness, life, freedom, responsibility, and how we can understand and manage our life to have a great leadership. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, as a friend of the show, you know how committed we are in bringing you guests who can expand you beyond what you're comfortable with in order to assist you in your growth. Because let's face it, for most of us, what we know becomes comfortable, and that quickly becomes the padded cell of our mental confines. So let's start here. I want you to consider what it means to lead. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that you as an individual are more than the individual. That who you really are expands beyond your human biosuit you call a body, and that you are floating around in a pool, an ocean, if you will, of consciousness where everyone you interact with is being impacted by your state of being and you by theirs. Does that sound a bit woo-woo? Well, what if all that was being said to you by somebody who was a physician trained at Harvard and Massachusetts Institute of Technology, someone with a Ph.D. and was a neuroscientist? Would you still think it was woo-woo? Maybe not, huh? Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. You can find out more about me by going over to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who completely disagree? This is exactly what your heart, your mind, and even your soul have been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some real and oftentimes intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. I'm talking about astronauts, philosophers, neuroscientists, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, entrepreneurs, Grammy award-winning entertainers, and a whole lot of folks who you may think you would automatically disagree with, who you will find truly fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com and find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into delicious episodes of Curiosity Bite. As always, you can find both of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And we are always grateful for you for helping us stay relevant. So if you can do that, please get over to wherever you tune into podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also listen to us through Google Home or Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, it is incumbent upon you, incumbent on all of us, to commit to our continual growth. Furthermore, as we grow, I believe that it's deeply important that we dig deeper into our own hearts and minds to discover our own biases. We must do this in order for our mental, emotional, and even spiritual understanding of those that we serve and potentially to serve the world. Simply put, any leader worth their salt must be human-centric, understanding themselves and those that they serve. That often means getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So take a deep breath, get grounded, and step off the edge so that you can consider that you and I are swimming in a grand ocean of consciousness. But what does that mean in practical terms to you as a leader? Well, let's find out exactly that, because our guest on this show is Tony Nader, Dr. Tony Nader, MD, Ph.D. He is a physician trained at Harvard University and MIT with a Ph.D. in neuroscience. His training includes internal medicine, psychiatry, neurology. He was a clinical and research fellow of neurology at Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and assistant director of clinical research center at MIT. He is the author of a brand new book called Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome Dr. Tony Nader! Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me,
here, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful to be with you. This is a great introduction. It really gets us into the ocean of thinking, the expansion of the mind, and your introduction is absolutely on top of the world.
Thank you, sir. Now, I want to start here because I want to confront any biases that is coming up, because you are a highly trained man of science, and yet you are also named by the Maharishi as a successor to the international transcendental meditation organizations in over 100 countries. That, for many people, will seem like a contradiction. Walk us through how you balance that and make sense of it for the person who has the natural biases, understandably, of saying, that's woo-woo, this is business and science, how these things come together.
The path is really a path of research and study and discovery. I have tried to understand human behavior. I was born in a situation where things were very comfortable for me. And then suddenly it all exploded in a civil war that is terrible. And that led to untold suffering and untold loss to people, young people, old people, children, born innocent people. And so my question was, what makes people think the way they do? What makes people do what they do? What makes us go so crazy about things? You know, even people dying, killing each other for beliefs, in the name of God, in the name of whatever economy or politics they believe in. Mm-hmm. And I thought maybe the best way to do it is to study the human physiology, because that is, in my mind at that time, what upholds our mind, what creates our consciousness through the nervous system. So I went into medicine as a vocation to help others and heal and remove suffering, but also as a discovery of the mechanics of functioning of the nervous system and the body. And that's why I went into psychiatry, internal medicine, and I felt they were treating disease and it's progressing, but didn't have the full answers. At the same time, I thought maybe I need to get into research. I went into neurology and then went into the science and research. And that's how I got a PhD in brain and cognitive science. I was lucky to be at MIT, a great institution, and Harvard was really a wonderful experience, but it was fragmented in a sense. You know, you study some molecules, you study certain aspects, and the answers were not completely there. At the same time, I had learned transcendental meditation, which helped me discover something very, very special, and that is my inner self. Going into the self as different and transcending, which means going beyond the surface value of the individual identities, individual feelings, fragmented values, and discover that this has helped a lot, not only my mind, but also my physiology, my ability to concentrate, my health, my well-being. And I studied the research on it and was convinced that there is something profound that comes from the mind. Mm-hmm. And I followed the scientific studies about even what are we made of, because once you discover there is a physical reality, a material reality, you ask, what is this material made of? What is our body made of? it's made out of organs, organs are made out of cells, cells are made out of molecules, molecules are made out of atoms. And then scientists go from the biology to the chemistry to the physics of things, which underlies all of these values. And as you know, Dov, and I know you are expert in these fields of quantum mechanics and beyond, they discovered realities that were unexpected. And that is a field of possibilities where there is superposition of things, where there is non-locality, where there is quantum values, where there is probability. And as they went deeper into that, they discovering that all that is appearing on the surface comes from a non-material value, which is physical on some level because it is fields of energy and fluctuations of fields. And those fields have been more and more unified. And today the scientists contemplate a unified field of all the laws of nature that is quite abstract. And when you look at the greatest physicists in our world and who looked at that, Wheeler, Planck, all of them, they really felt and they said that this field is like consciousness, as if it's a field of consciousness. And that is, Planck even said, who's one of the highest, most advanced, who is the father of quantum mechanics in many ways. He said, one thing I can tell you after studying the physical reality is that the origin of the physical is non-physical. It is consciousness. So from both sides, from the ancient side of the science of consciousness, and from the objective side, the science of the material, the ultimate reality coincides into that reality which is beyond the matter. And looking into that, studying the effects of that and the implications of that, I truly came to the conclusion and understanding that actually consciousness is at the basis of everything. And it is not the material life that produces consciousness, but it is actually consciousness that produces physical and then material expressions and manifestations.
Yeah, I mean, you and I right there could spend a couple of weeks having a chat. Not a couple of hours, but a couple of weeks. And I think, I want to bring this down into the level of leadership, because somebody who's a leader is watching this and saying, okay, well, that's pretty fascinating. Okay, I've heard this stuff around quantum physics. And, you and I just talked about that there's the psychology, even at the psychology level, for a lot of leaders is a leap to understand that, that their psychology is impacting the people they serve. But then to taking that deeper still and saying, hold on a minute, there is a field of consciousness that you're in, and that is impacting people, and the work of Sheldrake in whether it's, resonance fields and how those work, or morphogenetic fields, we're in these fields. And one of the things I talk about in my work is your culture is a field of consciousness. And the way that I explain that to them is, imagine that there's a pool, and I use that term, a pool that holds all the knowledge of the company, but it's not just the information of the company or how we work or what it is we sell or even our corporate culture, but it's everybody's beliefs inside of that and how everybody feels. And they go, yeah. And I go, and now imagine that you are a massive contributor to that field because you're the CEO. They go, okay, now what is everybody swimming in? And they go, well, mine doesn't matter. And here's the analogy I give. It may be a little graphic for you as a very higher level individual than maybe I am, but I say this. I want you to imagine there's a barrel of water. It's beautiful spring water. And you go, yeah. And they go, would you drink it? And you go, of course. And I say, okay, great. Now I'm just going to drop one dog turd in there. Are you still drinking it? And they go, no. And I go, so how big does the pollutant have to be to make you not drink it? One dog turd, right? That's all it takes. Are you the dog turd, or are you keeping the water clear? And that's the understanding of the consciousness of a corporate culture. And that's why I believe there's a responsibility for us to keep filtering and cleaning and evolving ourselves in that. Do you think that that's a good, I'm not saying about the spring water, but do you think that that's a good explanation of how a leader can possibly understand how this works?
Absolutely. From many different levels, consciousness can be approached for this. On the ultimate level, if the reality comes from one unbounded field of consciousness, which means the source of all the managing intelligence that creates and manifests as the universe, this is where you want to be. Leaders want to be leading, and you know that if you want to go to a company, you want to go to a country, you want to go somewhere and achieve something, there is some principle of going to the highest first. You know, if you go to the different layers, of course you can climb and all of that. But if you go to the owner, if you go to the chief, if you go to the deciders, if you go to the management, to the board, the ultimate reality that is actually the final reference in the company or in the structure or in the field, then you get the ability to achieve more. So to lead, if you have at your disposal that power, that intelligence that manages the entire universe in perfect order, or whatever, you know, order plus chaos plus freedom, this is a different topic which we can also talk about, then you are established in that field that allows you to control those fields of life. Now, one might not believe in this, and it's just, okay, it's an idea. It's actually something that one can conclude from scientific research, from analysis and deduction. But in any case, consciousness is something that we need to understand, because everything we do, everything we dream of, everything we manage, everything we experience, everything we plan is on the platform of consciousness. If you have no consciousness, what would you be? This is really taking it to an extreme, but this contrast helps us to see the importance of that value. Without consciousness, we cannot love, we cannot experience, we cannot plan, we cannot manage, we cannot lead. And consciousness has been thought of as either you have it or you don't have it. Actually, consciousness is a huge range of possibilities. You can be in a sleep state of consciousness. You can be in a dream state of consciousness where you're living an illusionary life. You can be waking but dull. You can be waking but alert. You can be alert but stressed and strained. You can be alert but rested at the same time. So restful alertness can be there. And you can be very awake and sharp and pick up on things like a lightning and see things from a broad perspective. And this is where the leader is. What's the difference between a leader and a follower or a non-leader? It's the leader has broader consciousness. The leader sees more variables in the environment. And when you have more variables that are in your awareness, you are able to choose by computing more factors that influence the end product of the situation. If you know only one thing about, the market, one small, tiny little information, like, most people who are not aware of it, then they make their choices based on local, small, narrow knowledge. If you have an inside knowledge, which is sometimes illegal, but of what's going on in a certain product, what discoveries are going to be made, what things is going to happen, this broad comprehension allows you to make a more sure and secure and successful decisions. So what do we need to do that? Broaden our awareness and be established in that field where we are infinitely rested within, and yet very broad awareness with broad comprehension. So ability to focus with broad comprehension. This is sometimes called in scientific terminology, field independence, which means you can actually fly your plane, but keep situational awareness. For pilots, this is very important because things can happen and you can get bogged down by a small thing and then you stop flying the plane. So situational awareness requires broad comprehension and broad consciousness. And there is a way to develop consciousness.
Let's bring that into the practicality for a minute. So just so everybody's staying with us. So the thing I want you, as you listen, as you watch right now, to just consider is this, that in a Newtonian world that we used to live in of science, you have a brain, therefore you have consciousness. In a quantum understanding, you have consciousness, therefore you have a brain. It's exactly the opposite. That consciousness is first. You're not a lump of meat that creates consciousness. Consciousness creates the lump of meat. So that's just to consider for a minute. By the way, that's not Tony's idea or my idea. That is, go do your research on it. There's more research that you could possibly consume. So that's where we need to start. So now, as understanding that you are created in this consciousness, you might go, but what's that got to do with me? And I want to just put it in the context of what Tony was just sharing with you. It's this. Let's take, for instance, let's say you have a marketing company and you are trying to market and it's 1960. What are you going to do? You're going to do a Yellow Pages ad, if it exists. You're going to do a few TV ads, a bit of radio, maybe a newspaper ad, and you're going to reach a local market. Now we take that same person from 1960 and move them into 2020, and we say, how are you going to market? They go, I don't know. I'll try newspapers. No, nobody buys them anymore. I'll try TV. No, not everybody's unplugged the TV. What about radio? Oh, nobody listens to the radio. What are we going to do? Well, there's this thing called the internet. So now we've got this global reach. And then you go, well, how do I know how do I get to people? Well, there's this thing called AI and algorithms, all higher levels of, quote, consciousness that you're using to tap into. The more you tap into those tools and those abilities, the better you become at what you do. So think of consciousness as this ability for you to tap into and pull in all the resources. But as Tony was just explaining, in a calm, focused way, while having a deep awareness, but an absolute focus. And this is where we as leaders often fall down. We become so niche, so focused, that we now don't have situational awareness. We're only focused on our pinpoint objectives, and we start missing things. And as you've heard me say on many of these shows, if you are a strategic leader, you are going to fail in today's world, because you need to be a human leader who does strategic things. You have an awareness of your people and the culture. So that's what we're talking about here. And understanding that, to take it to the next level now, is to say, okay, so if you can grasp that as a metaphor of how it all works, all right, the person listening, watching us is saying, okay, I can get that, but I don't know how. What is the how, the practicality of how do I broaden my consciousness? Should I take a psychology course? Should I do some coaching? I've been reading about mindfulness in leadership. Is that the path? What's the practicality, Tony, for our leaders?
Let me first say that everything we expose ourselves to leads to a transformation in us. When even you see a flower, now you have in yourself something of the flower. The impact of the flower is very, very tiny, so it's insignificant. But you expose yourself to more knowledge, then you get more experience. So knowledge, information, of course, are helpful. But what if you can expose yourself to consciousness itself?
Yes.
What if you can expose yourself to the fountainhead of that value which manages your awareness? What this takes really is an unexpected direction to go to. Usually we are searching for more in the outside. So we search for more information, more interest in things, and these can help. There is no question. Every moment of experience, if it's a good moment, leads to greater knowledge, greater awareness. We always want more. We want more happiness. We want more power. We want more love. That is the nature of life. But we always look for more in the outward direction through our senses. What one can do, and there is technologies from the ancient knowledge of Veda and yoga and all these the profound technologies of consciousness, that allows you actually to look inside. And since, as you said so beautifully, Dov, I should have written the book with you, but it's already out, maybe the next edition. that consciousness is what creates the outer value. That is, of course, how is this possible? It's crazy. How can something abstract lead to the perception of things that are physical and material, and real chairs and real tables and real planets and real everything? This is explained in the book on Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness, but maybe that's not the point. If you like to go into that, we can maybe have an idea, but let's assume this is the reality. Now, suppose you can go to that, and suppose, since this is the reality, since that unified field of the laws of nature is a field of consciousness, suppose you have access to that, then you have access to broadening your awareness and being in that fountainhead in the highest value that actually manages and constructs the universe. And there is a technology for that. What the technology is to go within and actually transcend, which means go beyond. Go beyond what? Go beyond everything. Go beyond your thoughts, go beyond your feelings, go beyond your belief, go beyond your anything. To where? To yourself. Because all the other things are part of expressions of yourself, but they're not your full self. And that is what one discovers through this practice of transcendental meditation. And that is to go beyond the values of the surface. And there is a technique to do it. There is a simple, easy technique to do it. It is natural because it uses the natural tendency of the mind to want to go more and more. And since more than the most is here within us, it's not outside, by turning the direction inside, we allow the mind to settle down. And there is a technique, because as the mind settles down, it can find, obstacles, can find stresses, can find strains, it can fall asleep, it can do this and that. So you have to learn in a systematic way, but it's very simple. Within 3-4 days, one learns it and then practice it on their own, on one's own. And then you actually expose yourself to that field of inner deep rest, which is a new state of consciousness that has been described by scientists as a fourth major state of consciousness, which is transcendental consciousness. So it's not just on the experiential level, but the physiology is transformed. How is it transformed? There is very, very deep rest, even deeper than rest of sleep, which means the body can recuperate. But at the same time, there is great alertness, great wakefulness. This is not something you find in deep sleep where you have rest, but you don't have alertness. In dream, you have an illusionary world, and there is actually activity in the mind that is going on, and even activity in the physiology. And in the waking, you're alert, but you are very dynamic and active and outward going. Here you are like the deeper than the sleep in terms of rest, yet more alert than even wakeful state. And that's why it was described as a major fourth state of consciousness, which is a hypometabolic, alert, wakeful state, or restful alertness is also described. This, as you practice this and you get yourself established in it, as you go into activity, you maintain that value. You maintain this restfulness, which allows you to have broad comprehension. At the same time, you can focus sharply. The thing that happens is in stress, our awareness narrows. And therefore, if we don't maintain that, what you repeatedly, beautifully explain, you of course know it very well, this broad comprehension that you have asked the leaders to maintain, this open awareness, this situational awareness is maintained while the ability to focus is there. But under stress, and I don't know if the time allows to just, it's an example that happened, to me, I mean, as an experience was very important. In the 1970s, United Airlines pilots were flying a plane with passengers, yes, and the little light went off, just a little light. They were so busy with the little light and concerned about it, all the crew, that they actually crashed the plane, unfortunately, and there were so many casualties that has happened. What they did is they focused on a point and they forgot to fly the plane. And
Yes.
since then, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, decided to establish this importance of situational awareness. Fly the plane first, deal with the situation as you go on. So maintain your awareness broad, maintain your purpose, your goal, and then you deal at the same time with the local thing. How many people, Dov, we see that crash their whole life because they focus on a small thing and forget the wholeness of life? Therefore,
And I want to put a pause in there for a moment, because I want people to grasp that. Because as leaders, we're often the people who are fixers. We're often the people that people come to and put their hand up and say, oh, how do we get this? And, the research shows very clearly that the average CEO has about 45 minutes per day of high productive time. And the reason for that is because they're constantly being interrupted by everybody's little red lights that are going off. And they're flying the plane for 45 minutes when they're actually there for maybe 9 or 10 hours. And so one of the wonderful things about what Tony is sharing with us here is this understanding that, yes, you do have to set it up so that those things need to be fixed, but you have to have that broader spectrum awareness. And this is, in fact, a strategic understanding of how to lead, is through this broad spectrum understanding of things. So now I want to take it to this piece that I want you as a listener, as a viewer, to grasp. We know, all of us who are in leadership positions, we all know leadership is stressful. It's difficult. It's stressful. Your brain is being flooded with cortisol on a daily basis, and most of us have developed way too much tolerance for it. And so we're sort of running on that high level of stress. And most people in leadership positions, I believe, are responding from a state of what I would call functional PTSD. They are traumatized at every possible turn. Now, let's take that and understand that and go, okay, particularly after a pandemic and all that, trying to turn a ship on a dime and all those things. Now let's take all that and now let's look back at science and go, okay, so what do we know? We know that mindfulness meditation, just simple mindful meditation, helps you to recover from that. Simple. Okay, what do we know? Taking care of your diet, your sleep, and all those things, you're not getting enough sleep is all damaging you. So if you're not getting enough rest, your brain doesn't function right. Now let's add to that a little bit more neuroscience, that when you are stressed, and this is really important for you, I want you to get this about why what Tony's really prescribing here is so vital for you as a leader. Even if you always thought all this stuff is woo-woo, I want you to consider this for a minute. If you think you're a scientific thinker, when you're in a highly stressed state and cortisol floods your brain, 27% of the blood flow to the neocortex, which is the front part of your brain that you make all your great decisions with, is cut off. You are literally 27% dumber than you were 5 minutes ago when you're highly stressed. What if there was a way for you in 20 minutes to completely reverse that, wash that cortisol away, put yourself back into a highly focused yet highly relaxed state? This is what we're talking about. The woo-woo disappears. The concepts are vast, yes. I get why you might be saying that, because what Tony's talking about is this vast, unbounded ocean of consciousness. What the hell does that mean to you? I get that. I understand the practicality of it. But now let's take it to the practical. This is a way to transform the way you think. It will actually change your neurons. The neuroplasticity of your brain will change. You'll be able to function at a higher level. Your body will be more rested, and you'll be a better human being. And by that, what do I mean? You'll just be less of a bitch. You'll be less bitchy, less pissy with people. You'll be more compassionate, kinder, and you'll be more understanding, which will make you a better leader, because again, you have to be human-centric. So this is why I want you to grasp this at a practical level of making you a better leader. Now, before we go on to anything else with that, Tony, I want to talk to you a little bit, because you've become this man of science, and like you and I have this thing in common, which is fascination with why people do what they do, how they do what they do, what is it that drives human beings, you know, gone down some of the same paths, different vehicles, but gone down some of the same path. You're now, as I said, you're now the leader of the TM movement around the world. All journeys appear to have a beginning and appear to have an end. So at any moment we're observing the person, that's the end as far as we're concerned. So we look at, oh, here's this guy, MIT, Harvard, you know, running TM, blah, blah, blah. Wow, you know, he must have always had his poo in a pile. That's a technical term. He must have always had his poo in a pile. Let's talk about the humanity of the journey for a moment. Talk to us a little bit about who you were before. Like, what was something you used to do on a regular basis that got in your own way? And what is it that transformed your journey so that you could shift and maybe move a little bit away from how you were doing things?
I think from my side, one thing was that I realized is self-righteousness that is too strong can be an obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one has to often realize that one can be wrong even when one is absolutely convinced that one is right, because then you close the windows of understanding and the windows of perception and like that. And what I have learned and helped me grow and develop this ability to understand more is first to go into myself and realize that there are realities, there are options that are, you know, beyond your expectation of how the world should be, how things should be, that might have truth in them. And that truth can be in different places, hidden in different ways. And it's for you to uncover it and see why people do what they do and how they do it and the reasons why they do it. And so to ask yourself really on a humanity level, because that's the word you used, that everybody's really searching for more. Everybody's trying their best. And they come from some background, some prejudice, some expectations, some fears. And like that, if you can awaken in them the reality, if you can awaken in them their touch with the self, if they can be open to other possibilities, and even when there are contradictory things and opposite things, use those for growth rather than for clashing and struggle and strain and opposition. But there are ideas that can be used and can be from a different perspective than what you have and can help you to grow. And the major one, absolutely the most major one that I have come across is the fact, as we discussed at the beginning and you so beautifully brought, that is it matter that is primary? Because that's what we see. You know, I'm a neurologist, I'm a neuroscientist, and I know that if you damage the brain, you damage awareness, you damage how the mind works. So the natural, normal conclusion of this is that it's the brain that creates consciousness. However, if you just think about it a little bit differently, if you have a radio and you talked about the radio, and you turn the radio on, you can get the music because it's picking up the waves. Now, if you damage the radio, you can't hear the music. Does it mean it's the radio that was actually the source of the waves that are in the air? No, the waves are still there. It's just the mechanism or the instrument of detecting or feeling that has been damaged. Yes. So this is just an example of the fact that sometimes we come to conclusions that are not necessarily true conclusions. And in science, this is why scientists keep their minds open for all possibilities, and they want to repeat things many times and look at different variables from different angles. You know, if about consciousness, this, transcending and going transcendental meditation has been shown, for example, to not only bring more blood flow to the CEO of the brain, as you described, the frontal part of the brain, but also to open the reserves of the brain and allow more coherence between right and left, so that all these processors that are in our brain, billions of them, or let's say thousands if you want to clump them into bigger pieces, either they are processing the information separately and therefore they have limited ability, or they actually coordinate and talk to each other. And then the computer, which is the brain, becomes a very powerful computer that connects all these aspects together. So you want to see things from this perspective, from this perspective, from that perspective, from the past, from memory, from anticipation of the future, from the color of it, the smell of it, the touch of it, the feeling of it, its significance in society, in significance for you, in significance for the company. And all of these are different processing systems. If all of these work together and talk to each other openly, then you can truly analyze the situation in a broader way. So this on a neurological, very physical electroencephalographic and PET scanning level, we see the importance of developing consciousness because we see coherence between right and left and opening and more blood flow to these areas that are the executive parts of the nervous system. Right. So it is on a certain level abstract, conceptual, if you like, on a human level and all of that. But on another level, because mind and body are really different expressions of the same thing, they're not really so different. You can detect in the nervous system, you can detect in the physiology the decrease in cortisol, which is very, very real. You can measure it. And many scientific studies have been done repeatedly to show that consciousness transcending lead to changes in cortisol and brain functioning and blood flow, etc. So it's a very real thing. It's evidence-based. It's not just theory and philosophy.
Exactly. It's evidence-based. And again, I encourage you as a viewer, as a listener, to make sure that you go and do some research. Find out as I keep saying, the biases is that it's woo, and then you'll discover it's actually very much science. But I want to come back to the piece I just said, because I work with leaders every day, and I understand that we all get embedded. We all get our own biases about all kinds of things. And yet we can all sort of say, well, I know I should grow, but, and there's a but there that is the bias. So that's why I was asking you about this moment of realization that you were being righteous, that you were being stuck in a way of thinking, because I want people to understand that wherever you are, when I say you, I mean me too, wherever we are, that is the upper levels of our understanding and grasping that there is more, that we might not be fully right, that we may be right, but not there's more to understand. This is why I wanted people to grasp this idea of where you were. When did you get confronted with this understanding that you were behaving or being in a place of righteousness, which is actually the limitation on your growth?
Well, I'd be shy to say it really, but you're asking me, it's okay. I grew up in a very Christian family. I went to a Jesuit school, and I believed so deeply in God and the justice and the supreme thing, which I still do. It's a personal thing anyway. But I felt like everybody else was wrong. And it's like a kind of a missionary zeal to make sure that everybody should know the truth. It's like you're lost, you guys, you don't know what is the ultimate truth. And the ultimate truth is the way I learned it at school, the way I was brought up in. And I happened to be in a country, in Lebanon at that time, which had a very, very divided situation where there were Muslims on one side and Christian on the other side. And they got into war and conflict. And, I felt like the others are completely wrong. and they felt that we are completely wrong. And so there are this tension that started there until I started to see that they have been brought up like me in a different context, and therefore we are the same kind of background, of country, of environment, of weather, of culture in a sense, of history in a sense. And yet people are killing each other. Why? Just because they were brought up there. What if that boy who is fighting in the trenches against that other boy, what if they shift camps from when they were born? They would be fighting still this way or that way. What will be happening? And therefore, our upbringing and our context creates filters for our perception. Now, every religion, every belief has beautiful things in it. And oftentimes it is the interpretation and the extremism and one-sided vision that prevents us to see the beauty in other things or the similarities in other aspects of life. And so if you start studying more and more the different belief systems, the different religions, the different thoughts, the different philosophies, you can look into truth that is absolutely there. And this is one thing that I'm really, happy to be able to share in this one Unbounded Ocean of Consciousness book. And that is that the book actually gives credit and truth to, be it the atheist, the polytheist, the monotheist, the believer in God in this way, the believer in nature in that way, the forces of nature in that way. And on a simple paradigm that we all deal with, consciousness is something we have, so we can't say it's something extraneous or outside ourselves. We can actually find that unity of life and that unity of being that is our common denominator and that unifies us beyond differences on the outside level. In the same way as a tree has a leaf, has a branch, has a fruit, has a flower, have different colors, different shapes. Some is rough, some is smooth, some is sweet, some is harsh, but they all come from the same sap, from the same field that nourishes them all. We are all pure consciousness, pure being, expressing itself in this infinite diversity. And therefore, in this internal unity of consciousness, we can find oneness with everyone and rejoice in the richness of the diversity of life, because flowers with so many colors in a garden make it nicer than everything is just flat and the same. So our differences should be a joy and should be used to learn from each other and this outside field, while we know that we are unified and one on the more basic level of the true reality of existence. The rest is just different expressions of the infinite one unbounded ocean of consciousness.
I love that. One of the things that people will often, say who don't know me, but, will say, well, isn't what you're talking about with consciousness, isn't, is that going to interfere with my faith? And my experience is this, is whatever your faith is, it may not be mine, but whatever your faith is, in my experience of working with people, it strengthens it. It strengthens your faith, but removes some of your biases about it's the only way. And I've heard people say, but John 3:16, and we got to bring, I'm like, you can do all of that. Nobody's interfering with any of that, but you will be able to be acceptant in a much greater way. And once you're acceptant, you can take in more and you can act better, stronger, more focused in what it is that you're doing. And it's interesting because we are, as not like you don't know this, but we are living in a world that is more and more polarized. People are, I don't know if we actually are more polarized, but we're certainly more aware of the polarities. And the very famous film creator David Lynch wrote a piece about your book, and he said, in this milestone book, Dr. Nadler offers ideas that can change the world and create peace and harmony among, I mean, he said more, but, and create peace and harmony among people and nations. Many leaders in positions today are finding themselves to be increasingly nervous. They're leading individuals who are often sort of hold polarized religious or philosophical or political positions. So practically speaking, what does this book offer those leaders to assist them in dealing with and leading their people?
It leads them first to realize that they have truth. They have truth, but they're looking at it from their own perspective. And when we say that some people feel this is the only way, it could very well be, but for them, for you, it might be the only way. It's good to go for it. Just go full speed in it until you see whether you can understand it or not. We're not saying you should just accept, that there are other ways and you should be like the other and the other like you. There is, this is the beauty of the great United States and the unity between diversity from different countries and different cultures and different things, creating a place where people can share and accept each other and accept to let everyone live their full value and live their own things and yet be one and yet be one country for one wholeness and one fullness and one great nation. And so this book will bring this understanding that there is something which is consciousness that is at the basis of all these aspects, and you can look at it from different perspectives. These perspectives are actually infinite. One perspective is looking at the flower, another perspective is looking at the planet, another perspective is looking at another human being. Another perspective is a belief in something. A third an X perspective is a belief in another thing. And this is the richness of life flowing and growing and burgeoning and expanding and expressing itself in its fullness. And if we can understand that and see that in a logical, systematic way, and that's what the book brings, it really brings the common denominator, the common unifying value, and shows that there are different perspectives, as the divine something completely beyond, so it's totally beyond anything, has no reality that is manifest, or is it having expressions? How does it deal with the expressions or that? One can find answers in this book, even though the book is, of course, non-religious, non-belief based, it's systematic, it's just logic and science, and doesn't even encourage people to do this way or that way. It leaves everyone free to interpret what they like. But if you look deep in it, you can find answers to these big questions and find peace between yourself and other ways of seeing.
So what is your greatest hope / aspiration of the book, of somebody who picks up the book, who maybe is fairly new to TM or new to even the idea of consciousness? Maybe they're old enough that they heard of Maharishi when they heard of the Beatles. But that's kind of it. It was a flower power sort of moment, and they don't really know. And again, they have their bias. What is your aspiration? What is your hope of that person who would pick it up?
I think they will enjoy it. They will go on a story. It's the story of life, the story of being, the story of something that is the most intimate aspect of ourselves, which is our awareness, our consciousness, because it is the instrument, it is the screen on which the movie of life plays itself. And without it, we are not having any true life. We are a machine. But with consciousness, we can have freedom, we can have decision-making, we can have responsibility, we can understand why there is responsibility, why there is freedom, how freedom deals with laws and order and justice and all of that. And it really doesn't require to know absolutely anything about transcendental meditation or any meditation or anything from the past. It really starts gradually. It starts with my own story, a little bit, just in one chapter. It's not an autobiography. And then it takes you gradually, what is this thing we call consciousness? How does it make sense? Why is it important? How does science see the world and the universe? And how does this compare or is in tune with, or maybe could seem like as if it contradicts? So the questions are being asked, and the significance of these questions are being raised to guide the individual through a story. You know, we go to a movie to see a story. We learn not just from what happens at the end of the story. We learn from the development of the characters and their growth and their what they did and what it led and how it worked and all of that. This is the story, I would say, of consciousness, is the story of life, is the story of the unmanifest manifesting and why it did it and how it did it and what are the implications of these actions or the spontaneous manifestations of this phenomenon to our life in all fields of life.
Tony, this is truly a fascinating conversation. As I said, you and I could talk for a couple of weeks. Of course, that's not possible at this moment. However, I want to make sure that before we get to the end of the show, which is already moving closer to us, obviously I'm going to ask you to tell people where they can find out more about you and about the book. But before that, I would like for you to, if you can, lay out some practical way for our viewers or our listeners to really grasp what it is you've been talking about today, that something that they could possibly do in the next 24 to 48 hours, next hour or so even, that would help them to be a better leader by taking what it is you said and putting it into practical terms.
Don't act when you're fearful or tired or stressed. When you want to make a decision, go back to yourself. Take a moment, take a distance from things. Never react quickly. If you write an email that seems to be a little bit on a moment of upset or something that happened, don't send the email. There is no urgency. There is nothing as urgent as doing the right thing. Take your time, step back, come back to it. This going back to the self is extremely, extremely important. If you can practice transcendental meditation, which is the best way to go back to the deepest level of the self, and that will help you within short time to settle yourself in the bottom of the ocean of being. Our mind is like an ocean, active on its surface and quieter as we go deeper. If you are established and anchored in your ocean of being, in your own self, then you can create the biggest wave and control the waves and not be shaken yourself by those waves. So take it easy. Life is bliss and presents opportunities that are hidden. Think of it as hidden opportunities that you have to uncover, in the same way as Michelangelo used to say, I would look at the slab of marble and I see that my sculpture is already there. All I had to do is chisel away those parts that are hiding it, and then it will come. So think of life as having these hidden opportunities that you have to chisel away and remove that which hides it, and life will blossom and appear in great waves of fullness and bring fulfillment to you and all your desires.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Tony, would you please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you, about your book, and about all the resources that are available?
There is a site that we've created for the book. It's called drtonynader.com. drtonynader.com. And there is drtonynaderbook.com if you want to directly go to the book. This site explains about my background, where I have been a little bit, my life experience a little bit. And the book is actually coming tomorrow, and we're celebrating at 1 p.m. New York time, Florida, the Washington Eastern Daylight Time, the launch of the book. It is already available in pre-order as an ebook in English. So it'll be an ebook now, and it will come out as a print later, but it's available in Spanish and in Spanish as an ebook and as a print also. It is Random House Penguin that has published it. And now we are looking to publish it in all languages. We have already many contracts coming up in Italian and Portuguese and English on the way, and Hindi and others are being worked out. So drtonynader.com or drtonynaderbook.com. And for transcendental meditation, there is a website, tm.org, that can also be an easy way to access if you want to learn transcendental meditation. We have a university in Iowa, which is accredited to the Ph.D. level. It's Maharishi International University. We have the David Lynch Foundation, who is, doing wonderful work on, bringing this knowledge to underprivileged people and school children and all of that. And we are in 150 countries around the world. We have big activities in Latin America with great leaders there. Father Mejia, who is a Catholic priest, has taken this as a profound technique to help rehabilitate people, and he has thousands and thousands of students. So check us out. It will be wonderful. Read the book and let me know what you feel. Make your comments. It's available in all these platforms, Barnes and Noble and Amazon and, the Google and Apple and Kobo and all of that.
That's wonderful.
So it'll be a joy.
Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I sincerely thank you, sir, for your time and for your wisdom and your caring. And as I said, we will make sure that we post all the links to all those websites that Tony just shared with you. I encourage you to go out and discover the book. Don't just read it, but discover it. I encourage you to open your mind and realize that the greatest leaders, whether it's leaders of today, tomorrow, or of yesteryear, were not leaders who were simply knowledgeable. They were leaders who were wise, and wisdom is knowledge in application from widening the understanding. As we always like to say, questions require answers and somebody ends up wrong, whereas curiosity requires a deepening of understanding in order to serve the world at a higher level. That's what we're talking about here. So you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode that you've been listening to, or any of our past episodes inside of our Facebook and LinkedIn groups. Simply go look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are, if your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or for your organization, you can go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. We want to thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about what it is you know and how it is the limitation, not the expansion. How much more is possible? What would happen to your life if you were able to tap into everything that you need to know, not by shutting other ideas down, but by opening everything up, by living your life at a deeper level of empathy, compassion, and connection to life and to, of course, the unbound ocean of consciousness. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.